Welcome, I'm John, and today I'm going to tell you an exciting story. She whispered, "He's going to poison you," and the businessman stopped breathing immediately. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Beacon Hill mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors that Isabela Duarte had been polishing since 5 a.m. Her knees ached, but she didn't dare stop. In the 3 weeks since she'd started working for the Cole family, she had learned one essential rule: be invisible. At 25, Isabela carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her circumstances. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform pristine despite being second-hand. She moved through the grand house like a ghost, her footsteps silent, her presence barely acknowledged by the people who lived there. And that was exactly how she wanted it. The mansion itself was a monument to wealth, all pristine white walls, gleaming hardwood, and furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they made Isabela dizzy when she cleaned them. Every room smelled of expensive candles and fresh flowers that were replaced daily, whether they had wilted or not. Isabela had grown up in a cramped apartment in São Paulo, where 6 people shared 2 rooms, and the smell of her mother's feijoada was the only luxury they knew. This world of excess still felt surreal to her, like walking through a museum where she didn't belong. She paused at the threshold of the study, her cleaning supplies clutched in both hands. Through the half-open door, she could see Nathan Cole seated behind his massive oak desk, his silver-streaked hair catching the morning light. Even from a distance, he radiated authority, the kind that made people straighten their spines and choose their words carefully. Nathan Cole was a titan in the medical technology industry, a self-made billionaire who had revolutionized cardiac monitoring systems. At 52, he still possessed the sharp focus and relentless drive that had built his empire. But there was something else in his expression this morning, a weariness that softened the hard edges of his face. "The quarterly reports are unacceptable, David," he said into his phone, his voice firm but measured. "I don't pay you to make excuses. I pay you to solve problems." Isabela waited, not wanting to interrupt. She had heard the other housekeepers gossiping about Mr. Cole, how demanding he was, how nothing escaped his notice, how he could remember the smallest detail from a conversation months ago. They said he was brilliant but cold, respected but not loved. When he finally ended the call, Isabela knocked softly on the doorframe. Nathan looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. His were gray-blue, the color of a winter sky, and surprisingly kind despite his reputation. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Cole," Isabela said in careful English, her accent wrapping around each word. "I can come back later." "No, it's fine. Come in." He waved her forward, already returning his attention to the papers spread before him. As Isabela worked, dusting the shelves lined with medical journals and leather-bound books, she was acutely aware of his presence. In Brazil, she had been studying nursing before everything fell apart, before her father's death, before the debts, before her mother's illness forced her to make an impossible choice. Now, watching Nathan Cole review what looked like medical diagrams, she felt the ghost of that lost dream pressing against her chest. "You're new," Nathan said suddenly, not looking up from his work. Isabela's hands stilled on the shelf. "Yes, sir, 3 weeks. And before this? What did you do in Brazil?" The question surprised her. In 3 weeks, Mrs. Vivian Cole had never asked her a single personal question. Neither had the house manager, Mrs. Patterson, beyond what was necessary for work. I studied nursing, sir, for 2 years. Now Nathan did look up, his expression unreadable. "Why did you stop?" Isabela hesitated. How could she explain the weight of responsibility that had crushed her dreams? How her younger sister Sophia was still back in São Paulo, only 16 and vulnerable in a city that devoured the innocent? How every dollar Isabela earned cleaning toilets and polishing marble was a brick in the bridge that would eventually bring Sophia to safety. "Family circumstances," she said finally, the words inadequate for the magnitude of sacrifice they represented. Nathan studied her for a long moment, and Isabela had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her careful composure to the exhaustion and loneliness beneath. "That's unfortunate," he said quietly. Then, returning to his papers, he added, "You do good work, Isabela. Keep it up." It was a small compliment, barely an acknowledgement, but Isabela felt something warm bloom in her chest. As she left the study, she didn't know that this brief exchange would be the first thread in a tapestry that would soon unravel everything she thought she understood about survival, courage, and the invisible lines that separated people like Nathan Cole from people like her. Vivian Cole was the kind of beautiful that made people stop and stare. At 36, she possessed the effortless elegance that came from generations of old money and careful breeding. Her blonde hair always fell in perfect waves, her skin was porcelain smooth, and she wore her designer clothes with the casual confidence of someone who had never known what it meant to worry about price tags. Isabela had learned to read Vivian's moods by the click of her heels on the marble floors. Fast and sharp meant she was irritated. Slow and deliberate meant she was scheming. This morning, as Isabela arranged fresh orchids in the dining room, the sound was somewhere in between, measured but tense. "Those flowers are crooked," Vivian said as she breezed past, not bothering to look at Isabela directly. "Fix them." Isabela adjusted the arrangement, though it had been perfectly straight. "Yes, Mrs. Cole." She had worked in enough wealthy homes to recognize the type. Vivian treated the staff like furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. But there was something else about Mrs. Cole that Isabela couldn't quite identify. A brittleness beneath the polished surface, like fine china with hairline cracks running through it. Later that morning, Isabela was cleaning the second-floor hallway when she heard raised voices from the master bedroom. She froze, her dust cloth suspended in midair. "You promised me, Nathan." Vivian's voice was sharp, cutting. "You said we'd travel more, that you'd slow down. But you're more obsessed with that company than ever. The company is launching a new product line." Nathan's response was measured, patient. "You knew this when you married me, Vivian. I built this empire from nothing." "Oh, spare me the self-made man speech." The contempt in Vivian's tone made Isabela wince. "You're 52 years old. When do you plan to actually live? Or are you going to work yourself into an early grave?" There was a long silence. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was quieter, harder to hear. "Is that what you're hoping for? Don't be ridiculous." But something in Vivian's tone sent a chill down Isabela's spine. "I'm going to the spa. I'll be back for dinner." Isabela quickly moved down the hallway, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. But the conversation stayed with her, lodging itself in her mind like a splinter. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson, the stern-faced house manager, called Isabela into her office, a small, meticulously organized room off the kitchen. "Mr. Cole has requested that you handle his study exclusively," Mrs. Patterson said, her tone suggesting she found this assignment puzzling. "Every morning at 6 before he comes down. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Isabela kept her expression neutral, though her heart quickened. It was unusual for the master of the house to request a specific housekeeper, especially one so new. Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Cole is a very particular man. Don't give him any reason to regret this decision." The warning was clear. Isabela nodded and left, her mind racing. What had prompted Nathan to make such a request? Had she done something wrong? Or something right? That evening, as Isabela prepared to leave for the night, she passed through the kitchen one last time. The evening staff was preparing dinner, an elaborate meal that would feed 2 people but could have fed Isabela and her 3 roommates for a week. Through the kitchen window, she could see the garden where Nathan sometimes walked in the evenings, hands clasped behind his back, his expression distant. Tonight, he stood beneath an old oak tree, staring up at the mansion as if seeing it for the first time. There was something profoundly lonely about the image. This powerful man, alone in his castle, surrounded by beauty but seemingly untouched by joy. Vivian's words echoed in Isabela's mind. "When do you plan to actually live?" She thought of her own life. 3 jobs, a shared room barely big enough for a bed, instant noodles for dinner most nights. She was 25 and felt 40, but she was alive in a way that Nathan Cole, for all his wealth and power, didn't seem to be. As Isabela stepped out into the cool Boston evening, pulling her thin jacket tight against the October wind, she made herself a promise. No matter how hard life became, no matter how many toilets she scrubbed or floors she polished, she would never become like the people in that mansion. Beautiful and cold, wealthy and empty. She didn't know it yet, but in 3 days, everything would change. In 3 days, she would witness something that would force her to choose between her own survival and the life of a man who had shown her one small kindness, and in that moment, Isabela Duarte would discover exactly how much courage lived in her quiet, invisible heart. The 3rd morning of Isabela's new assignment began like the others, arriving at the mansion before dawn. The streets of Beacon Hill still quiet and dark. She let herself in through the service entrance, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The study was her domain now, at least for an hour each morning before Nathan descended from the second floor. Isabela had developed a rhythm. Dust the bookshelves first, then the desk, careful not to disturb the organized chaos of his papers. She would empty the wastebasket, water the small succulent on the windowsill, a plant so simple and out of place among the mansion's elaborate floral arrangements that it made her smile, and finally, vacuum the Persian rug. This morning, she noticed something new on Nathan's desk, a framed photograph that hadn't been there before. Curiosity got the better of her, and she leaned closer. It showed a much younger Nathan, maybe in his late 20s, standing beside a woman with warm eyes and a genuine smile. They stood in front of a modest house, nothing like the Beacon Hill mansion. This looked like a regular suburban home, the kind where families barbecued in the backyard and kids played in the street. Nathan's arm was around the woman's shoulders, and the joy on his face was so complete, so unguarded, that Isabela almost didn't recognize him. "That's Rebecca." Isabela spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Nathan stood in the doorway, wearing a navy sweater and jeans instead of his usual suit. It was barely 6:15. He was early. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. I didn't mean to." "It's fine." He walked into the room, his eyes fixed on the photograph. "My first wife. She died 12 years ago. Cancer." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with old grief. Isabela didn't know what to say. In her world, you didn't discuss personal tragedies with your employers. You kept your head down, did your work, and left. But Nathan seemed lost in memory, his usual commanding presence softened by something Isabela recognized, the particular loneliness of someone who had loved and lost. "She was a teacher," he continued, picking up the frame with careful hands. "Third grade. She used to say that I was too focused on changing the world to notice the small miracles happening right in front of me." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "She was right. I'm very sorry for your loss," Isabela said quietly, the words feeling inadequate. Nathan set the photograph down and turned to her. "You said you were studying nursing. What made you choose that?" The question surprised her. This was the second time he'd asked about her life, showing an interest that felt both unsettling and oddly comforting. "My mother," Isabela answered, her fingers twisting the dustcloth in her hands. "She has diabetes. When I was young, I watched the nurses care for her during a bad episode. They were so gentle, so strong. I wanted to be like that. And now you're cleaning houses instead." It wasn't said unkindly, but the truth of it stung. "Now I'm surviving, Mr. Cole, and helping my family survive." Nathan nodded slowly, understanding flickering in those gray-blue eyes. "That's a different kind of strength, isn't it? The kind Rebecca used to talk about." He paused. "There's a nursing program at Boston General. They offer scholarships for—" "Mr. Cole," Isabela cut him off gently but firmly. "I appreciate your kindness, but I'm not here legally. No scholarship program will take me. No hospital will hire me. This," she gestured around the study, "this is the best I can hope for right now." The admission hung between them, dangerous and honest. She had just confessed her undocumented status to a man who could destroy her life with a single phone call. But something about Nathan Cole, maybe the grief she'd seen in his face, maybe the way he'd spoken about his first wife, made her trust him. "I see," Nathan said finally. His expression was unreadable. "Well, your secret is safe with me, Isabela. You do excellent work. That's all that matters to me." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, sir." As she resumed her cleaning, Nathan settled at his desk, but she noticed he kept glancing at Rebecca's photograph. When Isabela left the study 20 minutes later, she felt something had shifted between them. Some invisible wall had cracked, just slightly. She didn't notice the figure watching from the second-floor landing. Vivian Cole stood in her silk robe, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the banister. Her eyes narrowed as she watched Isabela disappear down the hallway. That evening, Vivian made a phone call from her car, parked 3 blocks from the mansion. "It needs to happen soon," she said into the phone, her voice low and urgent. "I can't wait much longer." He's starting to ask questions. The voice on the other end said something that made Vivian's jaw tighten. "I don't care about the risks. Just make sure no one suspects anything. It has to look natural." She ended the call and stared out at the darkening Boston skyline, her reflection ghost-like in the car window. Behind her perfectly composed face, wheels were turning, and a clock had begun its final countdown. The small golden locket had become Isabela's talisman. She wore it every day, hidden beneath her uniform, a cheap piece of jewelry her mother had given her before she left Brazil. Inside were two tiny photographs, her mother on one side, her sister Sophia on the other. Whenever the weight of her new life threatened to crush her, Isabela would press her fingers against the locket through her shirt, feeling its warmth against her skin, reminding herself why she endured. It was Thursday morning, and Isabela arrived at the mansion to find an unusual tension in the air. Mrs. Patterson was barking orders at the kitchen staff, her face flushed with stress. "The Andersons are coming for dinner tonight," she snapped at Maria, one of the cooks. "Mrs. Cole wants everything perfect, and you—" She turned to Isabela. "Make sure the dining room is spotless. Use the good china, the crystal glasses. No fingerprints, no water spots. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Isabela spent the morning transforming the dining room into something out of a magazine spread. She polished silver until her reflection stared back at her, arranged flowers with mathematical precision, and set the table with hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion. She'd worked a double shift at the diner the night before, and her body was beginning to rebel. Around noon, she was in the kitchen organizing supplies when Vivian swept in, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't acknowledge Isabela's presence. Staff were invisible to her, always. But something about her conversation made Isabela's hands still on the cabinet she'd been organizing. "Of course I love him, Mother," Vivian said, her voice carrying that peculiar tone of someone who was performing rather than confessing. "But you have to understand, he's become impossible. All he cares about is that company. I'm 36 years old and I'm living like a widow." Isabela kept her eyes down, continuing her work as quietly as possible. "No, I haven't changed my mind," Vivian continued, lowering her voice slightly. "It's the only solution. And Dr. Morrison said it would be undetectable, natural causes. The man works himself to death anyway. No one would question it." Isabela's blood turned to ice. Her hands froze on the dish she'd been holding. "I have to go," Vivian said abruptly. "We'll talk later." When Vivian's heels clicked away down the hallway, Isabela stood paralyzed in the kitchen, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Had she heard correctly? Was Vivian planning to? No, it was impossible. People didn't do things like that. Not in real life, not in mansions in Beacon Hill where everything was beautiful and ordered and civilized. But Isabela had grown up in São Paulo, where she'd seen what people were capable of when money was involved. She'd watched her uncle waste away from mysterious illness after his business partner wanted him out. She'd heard the whispered conversations, seen the way everyone knew but no one spoke. Evil didn't announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. It came dressed in designer clothes and perfect makeup, speaking in cultured tones about love and solutions. That afternoon, Isabela moved through the mansion like a ghost, her mind racing. She had to be wrong. She'd misheard, misunderstood. Her English wasn't perfect. Maybe she'd confused the words. But when she passed Nathan's study and saw him bent over his work, his reading glasses perched on his nose, completely absorbed and utterly unsuspecting, something twisted in her chest. She thought of Rebecca's photograph on his desk. How much loss could one man endure? Around 5 o'clock, as Isabela was finishing the final touches in the dining room, Nathan walked in. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "It looks beautiful," he said, surveying her work. "Thank you, Isabela." She wanted to scream at him, to grab his shoulders and shake him and tell him to run. But what would she say? That she'd overheard his wife on the phone? That she thought, no, believed, Vivian was planning to kill him? Who would believe her? An undocumented immigrant against a woman from one of Boston's oldest families. She'd be deported before sunset. Or worse, she'd be labeled crazy, dangerous, a troublemaker. She'd lose this job and with it any hope of bringing Sophia to safety. "Mr. Cole," she heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you feeling well? Healthy?" Nathan looked at her, puzzled. "I'm fine. Why do you ask?" "No reason, just take care of yourself, sir." It was pathetic, useless, but it was all she could manage. That night, as the Andersons arrived and laughter floated through the mansion, Isabela left through the service entrance. She walked to the bus stop in a daze, her mother's locket heavy against her chest. She had witnessed something terrible taking shape, and she had no idea what to do about it. In her small rented room, she would lie awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, trapped between self-preservation and the weight of a conscience that wouldn't let her rest. The choice, when it came, would cost her everything. But Isabela Duarte was about to discover that some things, dignity, compassion, the value of a human life, were worth more than survival. The nightmare came to Isabela every night that week. In it, she stood in the Cole mansion's kitchen, watching Nathan drink from a cup while Vivian smiled. He would collapse, his eyes finding Isabela's across the room, accusatory and betrayed. "You knew," those eyes said. "You could have saved me, and you said nothing." She would wake gasping, her sheets tangled around her legs, her roommates stirring in their beds nearby. The small room she shared with 2 other Brazilian women, both cleaning houses, both sending money home, both living in the shadows, felt suffocating in those dark hours before dawn. On Friday morning, Isabela entered the mansion with a plan. She would watch, she would pay attention, and if she saw anything concrete, anything she could report, she would find a way to warn Nathan without destroying herself in the process. The kitchen was busier than usual. Mrs. Cole was hosting a charity luncheon, and the staff moved with military precision, preparing elaborate dishes that would be photographed for society pages. Isabela stayed in the background, cleaning, observing. Vivian appeared around 10, dressed in cream-colored silk, her hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She moved through the kitchen with the confidence of someone inspecting her domain, commenting on the presentation of the canapes, adjusting a flower arrangement. "The coffee service for the garden room," Vivian said to Mrs. Patterson. "I'll prepare Mr. Cole's cup myself. He's been complaining about the strength lately." Isabela's heart stopped. She busied herself with wiping down a counter, her hands shaking slightly. Mrs. Patterson nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Cole. Very thoughtful of you." Isabela watched from the corner of her eye as Vivian moved to the coffee station. The kitchen staff had turned their attention back to the luncheon preparations, no one paying attention to the lady of the house performing this small, wifely gesture. Vivian pulled a small bottle from her designer handbag. It was amber-colored, pharmaceutical-looking. With movements that were practiced and quick, she unscrewed the cap and tapped something into Nathan's distinctive coffee cup, the blue ceramic one he always used, the one Rebecca had given him years ago. Time seemed to slow. Isabela saw everything with terrible clarity. The way Vivian stirred the coffee with a silver spoon, the way she checked over her shoulder, the way her perfectly lipsticked mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then Vivian was gone, carrying the tray toward Nathan's study, and Isabela stood frozen, her dustcloth clutched in white-knuckled hands. This was real. This was happening. All her desperate hopes that she'd misunderstood, that her imagination had run wild, that she was being paranoid. They shattered like glass. Isabela's mind raced. She could call the police, but what would she say? That she saw someone put something in coffee? They'd want her name, her information. They'd discover her status. And Vivian would deny everything, would call Isabela delusional, would have her arrested for making false accusations against a prominent family. She could run, walk out of this mansion and never come back. Let Nathan Cole's fate be Nathan Cole's problem. She had her own life to protect, her own sister depending on her survival. But then she thought of Rebecca's photograph, of the way Nathan had spoken about his first wife with such tenderness, of how he'd promised to keep Isabela's secret, of the small kindnesses he'd shown, remembering her name, asking about her life, treating her like a human being rather than a piece of furniture. In that moment, standing in the Cole mansion's kitchen, Isabela understood something profound. She could survive by staying silent, but she couldn't live with herself if she did. Her mother's locket seemed to burn against her skin. She thought of what her mother had taught her, those long-ago days in São Paulo. "Minha filha, we may have nothing, but we have our souls. Never trade your soul for safety." Isabela moved before she could reconsider. She walked quickly toward Nathan's study, her heart threatening to beat out of her chest. Through the half-open door, she could see him at his desk, Vivian placing the coffee cup beside him. "I'll be in the garden room," Vivian was saying. "The guests should arrive within the hour." "Thank you, dear," Nathan replied absently, his attention on his computer screen. Vivian left, passing Isabela in the hallway without a glance. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Isabela slipped into the study. Nathan looked up, surprised. "Isabela, is everything all right?" She stared at the blue ceramic cup, steam rising from its poisoned contents. Her mouth went dry. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Once she spoke, there would be no going back. She would either save a life or destroy her own. "Mr. Cole," she whispered, her accent thick with fear. "Please, don't drink that coffee." Nathan Cole had built an empire by reading people, their tells, their hesitations, the micro-expressions that revealed truth beneath polished lies. In boardrooms from Boston to Beijing, he'd learned to recognize when someone was bluffing, when they were desperate, when they were dangerous. So when Isabela Duarte stood before him, trembling like a leaf in a storm, her dark eyes wide with terror, he knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't lying. "What did you say?" His voice was calm, controlled, but his hand had already moved away from the coffee cup. "Please, Mr. Cole." Isabella's words came out in a rush, half in English, half in Portuguese. "I saw, this morning, in the kitchen, Mrs. Cole, she put something in your coffee. From a bottle. A small bottle." Nathan's world tilted on its axis. He looked at the blue ceramic cup, Rebecca's last gift to him, now transformed into something sinister. "What kind of bottle?" "Medicine, I think. Like from a pharmacy. Amber color." Isabella's hands twisted together. "I heard her, a few days ago, on the phone. She said something about making it look natural, about Dr. Morrison helping." The name hit Nathan like a physical blow. Dr. Morrison was Vivian's personal physician, an old family friend who'd treated the Ashford family, Vivian's family, for generations. A man Nathan had golfed with, had trusted. "You're certain of what you saw?" Nathan asked, his mind already racing through implications, calculating moves like pieces on a chessboard. "Yes, sir." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I was afraid. I thought maybe I misunderstood, and if I was wrong..." Her voice broke. "I know what happens to people like me when we make accusations against people like Mrs. Cole." The raw honesty of it struck Nathan deeply. This young woman had risked everything to warn him. Her job, her safety, her dreams of bringing her sister to America, all of it hung by a thread, and she'd spoken anyway. "Sit down," Nathan said gently, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "Mr. Cole, I should..." "Sit, please." Isabela perched on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to take flight. Nathan pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. She took it with shaking hands. "I need you to tell me everything," Nathan said. "Every conversation you overheard, every detail you remember." And Isabela, he waited until she met his eyes. "I promise you, I will protect you. No matter what happens, you will not suffer for telling me the truth." Over the next 20 minutes, Isabela recounted everything. The phone conversation about solutions and Dr. Morrison, Vivian's visit to the kitchen that morning, the deliberate way she'd prepared the coffee. Her voice steadied as she spoke, as if unburdening herself of this terrible knowledge restored some of her strength. When she finished, Nathan sat in silence, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. 1,000 thoughts cascaded through his mind. How long had Vivian been planning this? How many times had she already poisoned him? Is that why he'd been feeling increasingly tired, sometimes dizzy in the afternoons? He thought of the past year of their marriage, Vivian's growing impatience with his work schedule, her sudden interest in his will and estate planning, the way she'd encouraged him to increase his life insurance for security. Signs he'd dismissed as normal marital tensions now took on a darker meaning. "Mr. Cole?" Isabella's voice was small. "What will you do?" Nathan looked at her. This brave young woman who cleaned his floors and polished his furniture, who lived in the margins of society, but possessed more integrity than people who dined at his table. "First," he said, "I'm going to make a phone call. Then I'm going to pretend to drink this coffee." He picked up the cup carefully. "And we're going to find out exactly what's in it. But if Mrs. Cole sees..." "She won't. Trust me, Isabela. I've been playing strategic games since before you were born." A grim smile touched his lips. "Though I admit, I never thought I'd be playing one in my own home, against my own wife." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. His head of private security, Marcus Chen, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate espionage and personal protection. "Marcus, I need you at the house, immediately, and bring a discreet testing kit." He paused. "I believe someone is trying to poison me." Isabela watched as Nathan transformed before her eyes. The tired, lonely man who'd shown her Rebecca's photograph disappeared, replaced by the calculated, strategic CEO who'd built a billion-dollar empire. His face hardened, his posture straightened, and his eyes took on the sharp focus of a predator who'd just realized he was being hunted. "Isabela," Nathan said, his voice firm but kind, "you've saved my life today. I won't forget that." Through the window, they could hear the sounds of Vivian's luncheon beginning in the garden. Laughter, champagne glasses clinking, the artificial gaiety of Boston's elite. The contrast was surreal. Civilization and murder, separated by a pane of glass. Marcus Chen arrived within 40 minutes, entering through the service entrance with a nondescript black case. He was a compact man in his early 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing and the controlled movements of someone trained in combat. Nathan had hired him 5 years ago, after a hostile takeover attempt had included death threats. They met in Nathan's private office on the 3rd floor, a room even the household staff rarely entered. Isabela stood by the window, feeling out of place among the expensive furniture and walls lined with awards and framed patents. "This is Isabela Duarte," Nathan said, introducing her with a respect that made her stand a little straighter. "She witnessed my wife tampering with my coffee this morning. She's the one who alerted me." Marcus studied Isabela with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, but she met his gaze steadily. She'd come this far. There was no point in cowering now. "Walk me through exactly what you saw," Marcus said, pulling out a tablet. Isabela repeated her story, more confident now in the third telling. Marcus took notes, asked precise questions about timing, about Vivian's exact movements, about the bottle she'd used. "And the coffee?" Marcus asked Nathan. Nathan gestured to the blue ceramic cup, now sealed in a clear plastic bag on his desk. "Evidence preserved. I pretended to drink it, then poured it into this thermos when no one was watching." He handed Marcus a stainless steel container. "I need to know what's in it." Marcus opened his case, revealing what looked like a portable laboratory. He worked with practiced efficiency, using droppers and test strips, his expression growing darker with each passing minute. "Temazepam," he finally announced, "a benzodiazepine. At this concentration," he showed Nathan a reading on a small digital device. "You're looking at roughly 30 milligrams. That's triple the standard therapeutic dose." "Enough to be dangerous?" Nathan asked, though his face suggested he already knew the answer. "In isolation, it would make you extremely drowsy, possibly cause respiratory depression. But if this has been happening regularly," Marcus met Nathan's eyes, "we're talking about cumulative toxicity, organ damage, and if she suddenly increased the dose, it could trigger cardiac arrest or respiratory failure, especially in someone your age who works the hours you do." The room fell silent. Isabela felt sick, her hand instinctively moving to her mother's locket. She had been right. Vivian Cole was systematically poisoning her husband. "There's more," Marcus continued, his voice grim. "Temazepam is traceable, but it metabolizes relatively quickly. If someone died from it and the death wasn't immediately investigated, if it was written off as natural causes, maybe stress-related cardiac arrest, it might not show up in a standard autopsy, especially if the doctor signing the death certificate wasn't looking for it." "Dr. Morrison," Nathan said quietly. "Vivian mentioned him in the phone call Isabela overheard. He's her family's physician." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we're looking at a conspiracy, not just an impulsive act. This is premeditated, calculated." He turned to Isabela. "The phone conversation you overheard? Can you remember anything else? Any other names mentioned?" Isabela closed her eyes, reaching back into her memory. She'd been so frightened that day, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear. But there had been something. "She said we'll be together soon," Isabela remembered suddenly. After she talked about Dr. Morrison, she said that, like she was talking to someone else, someone she wanted to be with. Nathan's face could have been carved from stone. "She has a lover." "It fits the pattern," Marcus confirmed. "Eliminate the wealthy husband, inherit the estate, start a new life. It's textbook." He began packing up his testing equipment. "The question now is what you want to do about it. We have evidence, but building a prosecutable case?" "I want everything," Nathan interrupted, his voice cold and precise. "Phone records, financial statements, surveillance footage. I want to know who she's been seeing, where she's been going, how long this has been planned. And I want it documented so thoroughly that her family's lawyers can't make it disappear." "That will take time," Marcus warned. "Days, maybe a week. Can you maintain appearances that long?" Nathan glanced at Isabela, who stood silent and pale by the window. "Can you?" he asked her gently. "Can you continue working here, acting as if nothing has changed? I know what I'm asking." "Yes," Isabela said immediately. Her voice was stronger than she felt. "I can do it." The truth was, she had no choice. She'd cast her lot with Nathan Cole the moment she'd whispered her warning. There was no going back now, no retreating to the safety of invisibility. She was in this, completely, and she would see it through. "Good," Nathan said. "Then we proceed carefully. Vivian can't suspect that we know. I'll continue my normal routine, but I'll be more careful about what I consume. A bitter smile crossed his face. It's strange, isn't it? 12 years ago, I lost my wife to a disease I couldn't fight. Now I'm being killed by a woman I chose to marry, using medicine meant to heal. The irony was cruel, but Isabela heard something else in his voice. Not just betrayal, but a profound sadness. Nathan Cole had loved before and lost. He'd tried to love again and been met with calculated murder. Downstairs, the luncheon continued. They could hear the faint sounds of laughter, of Vivian's voice thanking her guests for their generous donations to whichever charity was fashionable this season. Evil, Isabela thought, didn't always announce itself with screams and violence. Sometimes it wore pearls and served champagne and smiled for photographers, all while poison dissolved in a blue ceramic cup. The next 5 days were the longest of Isabela's life. She moved through the mansion like an actress in a play she hadn't rehearsed. Every gesture carefully controlled, every word measured. The weight of the secret pressed against her chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe. Marcus Chen's team worked invisibly, installing microscopic cameras in strategic locations, tracking Vivian's movements, monitoring her communications. Nathan continued his normal routine with Oscar-worthy performance, leaving for the office each morning, attending meetings, returning home for dinner. But he ate nothing Vivian prepared, drank nothing she touched, and at night he locked his bedroom door from the inside. Isabela watched it all from the margins, her role unchanged. The invisible cleaning woman, present but unnoticed. It was a strange kind of torture, knowing what she knew, seeing Vivian glide through the mansion with her perfect hair and practiced smile, playing the devoted wife for the remaining staff. On Tuesday afternoon, Isabela was cleaning the second-floor hallway when she heard Vivian's voice drift from the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and Vivian was on the phone, her tone intimate and warm in a way Isabela had never heard her speak to Nathan. "I know, darling. Just a few more days." A soft laugh. "He's been so tired lately. Dr. Morrison says it's just a matter of time before the stress catches up with him. These things happen to men who work themselves to death." Isabela's hands stilled on the banister she'd been polishing. She knew Marcus had placed a recording device in the bedroom, that this conversation was being captured, but hearing it firsthand made her stomach turn. "The Cayman account is ready?" Vivian continued. "Good. Once the estate is settled, we can finally stop hiding. I'm so tired of pretending, James. Tired of this mausoleum. Tired of playing the dutiful wife to a man who cares more about his company than his own marriage. James." Now they had a name. "I love you too," Vivian said softly. "Soon, my darling. Very soon. We'll have everything we've been planning for." When Vivian emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later, dressed for a charity event, she nearly collided with Isabela in the hallway. "Watch where you're going," Vivian snapped. Her earlier warmth evaporated. She looked at Isabela with barely concealed contempt. "And make sure my jewelry is properly arranged in the case. You left fingerprints on the glass last time." "Yes, Mrs. Cole," Isabela murmured, keeping her eyes down. But as Vivian descended the stairs, Isabela felt something shift inside her. This woman, dripping in diamonds that could feed Isabela's entire neighborhood in Sao Paulo for a year, had everything: wealth, beauty, status. And still, it wasn't enough. She needed more. She needed Nathan dead. That evening, Nathan called Isabela to his third-floor office. Marcus was there, his laptop open, displaying a web of connections that looked like something from a crime drama. "James Whitmore," Marcus said, turning the screen so Isabela could see. A handsome man in his early 40s smiled from a society page photograph. Old money Boston Brahmin, childhood friend of Vivian's. Recently divorced, significantly in debt despite his family name. He's been seeing Vivian for approximately 8 months. 8 months, Nathan repeated, his voice hollow. "We celebrated our anniversary 9 months ago. She gave me a watch, told me she wanted to grow old with me." He laughed bitterly. "I suppose she meant it. She wanted to watch me grow old and die, preferably quickly." "There's more," Marcus continued. "We found email exchanges between Vivian and Dr. Morrison. He's been providing the temazepam, disguising it as prescriptions for Vivian's anxiety. The emails suggest he's getting a cut of the inheritance. Looks like he has gambling debts in Atlantic City." Isabela sank into a chair, overwhelmed. This wasn't just Vivian's crime. It was a conspiracy involving multiple people, all willing to murder for money. "We have enough for the police," Marcus said. "Phone records, emails, the tested coffee sample, financial records showing the Cayman account Vivian mentioned today. It's airtight." Nathan stood at the window, his back to them, staring out at the Boston skyline. The setting sun painted the buildings in shades of amber and crimson, beautiful and indifferent to the human dramas playing out below. "Not yet," he said finally. "I want to hear it from her. I want to know why." "Nathan," Marcus began, but Nathan held up a hand. "I married this woman. I trusted her with my life, literally, as it turns out. Before I hand her over to the police, I need to understand." He turned to face them, and Isabela saw the pain beneath his controlled exterior. "Maybe that makes me a fool. Maybe I should just call the authorities and be done with it. But I need closure, Marcus. I need to look her in the eye and hear the truth." "That's dangerous," Marcus warned. "If she realizes you know, then you'll be there, won't you? You and your team." Nathan's voice was firm. "Tomorrow night, I'll confront her after dinner. You'll have everything recorded. And then," his jaw tightened, "then we end this." Isabela felt fear coil in her stomach. Tomorrow night, everything would come to a head. The careful pretense would shatter, and whatever happened next would change all their lives irrevocably. She touched her mother's locket through her uniform, seeking courage she wasn't sure she possessed. But when Nathan looked at her with gratitude and respect, seeing her, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time in her life, Isabela knew she would see this through to the end. Some things were worth the risk. Some truths demanded to be spoken, no matter the cost. Wednesday evening arrived with the weight of an executioner's blade. The mansion felt different to Isabela, the air thicker, the shadows deeper, as if the house itself sensed the reckoning that was coming. Marcus and his team had transformed the dining room into a surveillance hub without leaving a trace. Cameras hidden in the crown molding, audio devices embedded in the chandelier, backup recording systems in 3 separate locations. Nothing would be missed. Nothing could be denied. Isabela prepared the dining room with trembling hands, setting out the fine china and crystal that Vivian insisted upon. Each piece felt impossibly fragile, like everything else in this house built on lies and poison. "You don't have to stay," Nathan had told her that afternoon. "Marcus can handle this. You've already done more than anyone could ask." But Isabela had shaken her head. "I need to see it finished. I need to know that it ends." Now, as 7 o'clock approached, she retreated to the kitchen where Marcus had set up a monitor. She could see the dining room on screen, Nathan already seated at the head of the table, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, waiting. Vivian descended the stairs at 7 sharp, elegant in a navy dress that probably cost more than Isabela earned in 6 months. She'd had her hair done that afternoon. Her makeup was flawless, and she wore the diamond necklace Nathan had given her for Christmas, a gift that now seemed obscene in its irony. "You're home early," Vivian said, taking her seat across from Nathan. "I thought you had that conference call with Tokyo." "I canceled it," Nathan replied evenly. "I wanted to have dinner with my wife. It's been a while since we've really talked." Something flickered in Vivian's eyes. Caution, perhaps, or calculation. "How lovely. I was just thinking the same thing." The first course was served, a butternut squash soup that Maria had prepared under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye. Isabela watched on the monitor as they ate in silence, the clink of silver against porcelain the only sound. "I found something interesting today," Nathan said finally, setting down his spoon. "A bottle of temazepam in your bathroom cabinet. Quite a high dosage. I didn't know you were having trouble sleeping." Vivian's hand stilled halfway to her mouth. "It's nothing. Just stress. Dr. Morrison prescribed it." "Dr. Morrison," Nathan repeated. "Your family's physician. The one who's been billing my insurance for consultations that never happened. The one who owes $200,000 to casinos in Atlantic City." The color drained from Vivian's face. "Nathan, what are you—" "I also found it curious that you've been transferring money to an account in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts, but over 8 months it adds up to nearly $500,000. Nathan's voice remained calm, almost conversational, but Isabela could see the tension in his shoulders. That's a lot of money for someone who claims to love her husband. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You've been spying on me, going through my private—" "You've been poisoning me, Vivian." The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that spread through the room. Vivian froze, her face a mask of shock that would have been convincing if Isabela hadn't known the truth. "That's insane," Vivian said, but her voice wavered. "Nathan, you've been working too hard. You're paranoid. I had the coffee tested, the one you prepared for me last Friday morning, the one with 30 milligrams of temazepam dissolved in it. Nathan pulled out his phone and set it on the table. Should I play the recording of your conversation with James Whitmore? The one where you discussed how tired I've been lately? How it's just a matter of time? Vivian's composed facade cracked. She gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles white. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Nathan's voice was harder now, the pain breaking through his controlled exterior. Explain how the woman I married, the woman I trusted, decided that murdering me was preferable to simply asking for a divorce. A divorce? Vivian laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. And get what? A settlement? After a prenup your lawyers made sure was ironclad? I would have walked away with nothing, Nathan. Nothing but my name and a few $1 million that wouldn't last 5 years in my world. So you decided to kill me instead. I decided to free myself. Vivian's voice rose, years of resentment pouring out. Do you know what it's like being married to you? Living in this museum? Playing hostess to your boring colleagues? Watching you care more about quarterly reports than about your own wife? Rebecca might have been content being invisible, but I'm not her. Nathan flinched at his first wife's name, and Vivian saw it, pressed her advantage. You've been in love with a ghost for 12 years. I was supposed to compete with a memory, with Saint Rebecca, the perfect wife who died tragically young. Vivian's laugh was cruel. At least with you gone, I could finally live. James loves me. He sees me. He doesn't look through me like I'm just another piece of furniture in his precious mansion. In the kitchen, watching this unfold, Isabela felt tears stream down her face. Not for Vivian, never for Vivian, but for Nathan, who sat at his dining table listening to his wife admit she valued money and attention more than his life. I gave you everything, Nathan said quietly. You gave me things, Vivian corrected. There's a difference. The silence that followed was devastating. Then Nathan spoke, his voice empty of emotion. Marcus, you can come in now. The dining room door opened, and Marcus entered with 2 uniformed police officers. Vivian's face went from defiant to terrified in an instant. Vivian Cole, one officer said, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. As they read her rights and handcuffed her, Vivian's eyes found the cameras hidden in the crown molding. Understanding dawned. She'd been recorded, every word captured, every admission preserved. You bastard, she spat at Nathan. You sanctimonious bastard. But Nathan just sat there, looking older than Isabela had ever seen him, as his second wife was led away in handcuffs, still beautiful, still elegant, and utterly without remorse. The scandal consumed Boston's society pages for weeks. The arrest of Vivian Ashford Cole, along with Dr. Richard Morrison and James Whitmore, became the kind of story that people whispered about at country clubs and charity galas, equal parts horror and fascination. But inside the Beacon Hill mansion, an unexpected quiet had settled. Most of the staff had been let go, not out of cruelty, but because Nathan was selling the house. Too many ghosts, he'd told Marcus. Too much poison soaked into the beautiful walls. It was a gray November morning, 6 weeks after Vivian's arrest, when Nathan called Isabela to his study for the last time. She'd continued working through the aftermath, though the house felt hollow now, echoing with absence. Sit, please, Nathan said, gesturing to the chair that had become familiar to her. Isabela sat, her hands folded in her lap. Nathan looked different. Older, yes, marked by betrayal, but also somehow lighter, as if removing Vivian from his life had lifted a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. The trial starts in January, Nathan said. The prosecutors tell me it's airtight. Vivian's lawyers are pushing for a plea deal. That's good, Isabela said quietly. Marcus testified yesterday at the preliminary hearing. The judge asked him how the plot was discovered. Nathan's eyes met hers. He told them about a brave young woman who risked everything to save a stranger's life. Isabela's heart jumped. Did he use my name? No, I made sure of that. As far as the official record goes, you're an anonymous witness under protection. He paused. But I want to talk to you about your future, Isabela. About what comes next. He pulled out a folder, opened it carefully. Inside were documents, official-looking papers with seals and signatures that Isabela couldn't decipher. I've been working with an immigration attorney, one of the best in Boston. Nathan slid a paper toward her. This is a U visa application. It's for victims of crimes who assist law enforcement. Given your role in exposing Vivian's conspiracy, you qualify. Isabela's hands trembled as she picked up the document. A visa. Legal status. a path to citizenship eventually, and Nathan pulled out another paper. This is a scholarship letter from Massachusetts General Hospital's nursing program. Full tuition, books, living expenses. They have a special fund for students who show exceptional character and promise. The words blurred as tears filled Isabella's eyes. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. There's one more thing, Nathan continued gently. He handed her a final document. This is an employment contract with Cole Medical Technologies. We're creating a new position, Community Outreach Coordinator for our Immigrant Health Initiative. The salary is substantial enough to support you and, he paused, to bring your sister Sophia to the United States legally. I've already started the paperwork for her visa. Now Isabela did cry, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her mother's locket to her chest. All those nights in that cramped room, all those double shifts, all those moments of feeling invisible and worthless. And here was Nathan Cole, offering her not just survival, but a life, a future. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this for me? Nathan was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. When Rebecca was dying, she made me promise something. She said, Nathan, don't let your grief make you forget to see people. I didn't understand what she meant then. But you, his voice thickened with emotion, you showed me what she was talking about. You saw me when I needed to be seen. You acted with courage when you had every reason to stay silent. You reminded me that character isn't about wealth or status. It's about the choices we make when everything is on the line. He stood and walked to the window where Rebecca's photograph still sat on the sill, now joined by a new frame, one containing a small pressed flower. The succulent Isabela had watered every morning had bloomed, just once, a tiny white blossom that Nathan had preserved. That plant bloomed the day after Vivian was arrested. Nathan said, in 15 years, it had never flowered. Rebecca always said that flowers bloom when they're in the right environment, when they're cared for properly. He turned back to Isabela. I think the same is true for people. 3 months later, on a sunny February afternoon, Isabela Duarte stood in the arrival terminal at Logan International Airport, her hands shaking with anticipation. The crowd parted, and there she was, Sophia, 16 years old with their mother's eyes, clutching a worn suitcase and scanning the crowd with frightened hope. Sophia, Isabela called, waving frantically. Her sister's face transformed with joy, and they ran toward each other, colliding in an embrace that held years of separation, sacrifice, and finally, reunion. They stood there crying and laughing, speaking rapid Portuguese, oblivious to the crowd flowing around them. From a respectful distance, Nathan Cole watched the reunion, Marcus Chen beside him. You could have just written her a check, Marcus observed. Would have been simpler. Simpler isn't always better, Nathan replied. Besides, she earned every bit of this, and Cole Medical could use someone with her perspective, someone who understands what it means to fight for survival, to sacrifice for family. Those are the people who change the world. That evening, Isabela stood in her new apartment, a modest but clean one-bedroom in Cambridge, paid for by her scholarship stipend. Sophia sat on the couch, her eyes wide as she took in their new life. Is this real? Sophia whispered in Portuguese. Are we really safe here? Isabela touched her mother's locket, then opened it to show Sophia the tiny photographs inside. We're safe, she promised, and tomorrow we start building something beautiful. She thought of Nathan Cole, alone in his temporary apartment while the Beacon Hill mansion sold, beginning his own rebuilding process. She thought of Vivian, in a cell, surrounded by the ruins of her own greed. And she thought of herself, no longer invisible, no longer just surviving, but truly, finally living. The next morning, Isabela Duarte would put on business casual clothes instead of a uniform. She would walk into Massachusetts General Hospital as a nursing student, not as a cleaner. She would be seen, respected, valued. But tonight, she sat with her sister and told her stories of courage, of the quiet strength that lives in ordinary people, of how a whispered warning in a billionaire's study had changed both their lives forever. Some heroes, she told Sophia, wear capes and make grand gestures, but others simply speak truth when silence would be easier. They choose compassion when self-preservation beckons. They save lives not with dramatic rescues, but with the steady, determined belief that every life, rich or poor, powerful or invisible, matters equally. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world recognizes that courage and responds with grace. Outside their window, Boston glittered with promise. And for the first time in years, Isabela Duarte felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The end. Did you like this story? Would you have done anything differently? Tell me in the comments. See you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to receive more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Thank you very much.